Welcome back, I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Online, the Designs Dissected series, where we have our AI, DesignEye, look at a previous competition piece of mine and give us some feedback both in terms of the principles and elements of design and suggestions for other ways to interpret the class title. Today we're going to look at an abstract design. And for this competition, abstract is a defined design style, so it has to basically depict plant material used in a non-natural way. So most often it means that we manipulate it or we cut it or we turn it upside down or sideways or something in that fashion to make it abstracted away from the natural form of the material. Also, for this competition, we had to only use Australian native flora. So as you can see from the image, I have used yet another of my charity shop, op shop, tea light stand holders. And this one is a metal one with coloured discs up the two arms. I didn't want to use the top two arms for placements, particularly because I didn't want the design to go too high and be there, create no depth in the design itself. So what I've used is a Gaimea stalk on the tallest of the two stands, placed it sideways, drilled some holes into it, and into those holes I've glued some Craspedia or Billy Buttons stems at varying heights. And at one end of that Gaimea stalk I've got a branch that's got some Banksia slices of a flower glued to it. On the second of the stand pieces I've got a dried Banksia flower placed sideways, and then the remainder of the design uses a collection of the slices of a Banksia flower just grouped together, massed together to cover up some of that background of the stand so that it's not too dominant in the design but keeping within the colours of the stand itself. I didn't want to have to paint the stand, and it does lend itself to the colours that we find most often in Australian native flora. The design itself didn't place in the competition, and I was surprised, as were my fellow competitors, but looking at it now, probably 2 years later, I can see that there are some issues with it. So I'm very interested to see what DesignEye has got to say to us. I will also say that I struggle with abstract designs. It's just a concept that I can't seem to get quite right in terms of the eyes of the judges. I always think they look abstract to me. And this particular combination of design, I lent to a local cafe because I was running some workshops there, and they liked it so much that they've kept it. So at least it has popular appeal, if not judging appeal. Let's see now what DesignEye's got to say. Looking at line, first of all, the vertical and diagonal lines formed by the hanging and suspended elements create movement and flow, leading the eye up and down through the design. The curved stems and lines add a dynamic and organic quality to the otherwise geometric structure. Now this, I think, is the big problem with it, is that the lines that created by the stalks, the stems of the Craspedia, are not uniform. I remember wanting to have them angling the same way because they were all angled bar one, and I think it's the one that's so straight that throws out the whole composition of the design. The other big problem in terms of line is the small twig with the Banksia slices that's at one end of the Gaimea stalk. That goes in a completely different direction to the rest of the design, and for me, looking at it now, takes your eye away from the design. It says, go this way, don't worry about the rest of the stuff that's there. So a few problems for me with line. Let's look at shape and form. The combination of circular forms, discs and spheres, contrasts with the straight vertical lines of the structure, creating a playful yet harmonious composition. The use of negative space between the elements enhances the abstract quality, giving the design a light and airy feel. This is good. This is what I wanted to have, and I didn't want too many geometric elements to be part of the design. I wanted that rhythm to happen in the design in terms of the shapes and the forms, and I'm glad that the independent analysis has seen that as well. Texture. The rough fibrous texture of the spheres and dried materials contrasts with the smooth surfaces of the wooden discs and metal base. This juxtaposition of textures enriches the tactile appeal of the design, inviting closer inspection. And that's absolutely exactly what I wanted. We've got rough and we've got smooth and we've got shiny and we've got dull, so it sort of covers lots of bases in terms of the textures. Colour. The earthy tones of brown, yellow and ochre create a warm, cohesive palette grounded by the dark tones of the base and framework. The bright yellow accents provide focal points and energise the composition. And that's good too. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of the stand itself, I liked the colour palette that was presented to me that was on the discs that are part of the stand, and I looked for plant material that would enhance that and bring that together so that the stand was part of the overall composition of the design. Space. The design effectively uses both positive and negative space. The separation between elements allows the eye to move freely, preventing the arrangement from feeling cluttered. Once again, I think for me, with an abstract design, it's about minimal material. It's about having that negative space be part of the design. So it's rewarding to see that that's been the case with this design. Balance. The asymmetrical balance is achieved through the placement of the circular forms and hanging elements on either side of the structure. The visual weight is distributed well, with the base anchoring the design and the lighter materials drawing the eye upward. The bonus of this particular stand is that the discs allowed me to have a path, a meandering path, that your eye could follow from the base using the plant material to the disc to the plant material to the disc to the plant material, and bring your eye upward. I guess my concern is that where those forms finish, those disc circular forms finish, is where I've got the two horizontal placements. That presents the opportunity for your eye to stop at those points, and there is really, when I look at it, no connection between the first horizontal placement, the Banksia, and the top horizontal placement, which is the Gaimea stalk. Even though the stems are hanging down from it, there's a bit too much space there for me. I really needed to either continue that line up or have something off to one side that drew your eye towards it but brought you past the first of the horizontal placements to the second one. Proportion. The proportions of the elements work well within the vertical framework. The varying sizes of the discs and spheres create visual interest and avoid monotony. The hanging elements are proportionally appropriate to the overall height of the structure, maintaining harmony. I was very careful to maintain the proportions of the plant material that I was using, because the dominance of that stand really presented me with the sizes of the things that I needed to use to keep it in proportion, which is a good thing sometimes when you're planning. Rhythm. The repetition of circular forms and the hanging elements creates a rhythmic flow, guiding the viewer's eye through the composition. The varied placement of these elements prevents the rhythm from becoming predictable. As I said earlier, I wanted to have that path from the base up through the design, and so that repetition of the forms has worked well. As I said just a little bit earlier, in terms of where your eye travels through, I think that there is a lack of rhythm to bring you right to the top. The almost looks like there's a top section to the design and then there's the rest of the design. So I would have to rethink the rhythm as the complete design, rather than just following the placements of the structure that was already there behind the plant material. Emphasis. The bright yellow discs and spherical elements serve as focal points, standing out against the earthy tones of the design. The combination of textures and forms adds layers of interest, with no single element overpowering the others. And that's probably something that is fairly important in terms of an abstract design, as I have learned over the years with this judging, is that the judges like to see that there's no one focal point in the design, but that it is interest equated, I guess is the term that they use most often. That even though the AI DesignEye is telling us that the craspedia are forming focal points, you're not drawn to those and stop there. It still becomes, they are part of the overall impression you get of that part of the design. So harmony and unity, the earthy colour palette and consistent use of circular shapes unify the design, creating a cohesive and harmonious composition. The organic quality of the materials complements the abstract theme, enhancing the unity of the design. So both of those things always go together, the harmony and the unity, and it can very much rely on the colour palette that you use to be harmonious, as you would expect. And you can also create some contrast and some interest by having a colour palette that is not quite as harmonious as this one is here. The unity that is created by that colour palette means that that it reinforces that there's no one focal point, no one area of emphasis. So some suggestions now for making the design a little bit more appealing to the judges, shall we say. Enhance the vertical movement. Introduce a taller element or extension at the top to emphasize verticality and strengthen the upward flow of the design. Now this is where I think I need to rethink the Gaimea stalk placement across the top, because your eye definitely does stop there. I could probably have something behind it, but it's very dominant in terms of its colour and its size. So I might have to replace that with maybe a row of Banksias so that it repeats the Banksia theme, and then have something behind that again. So perhaps some foliage or something that was a little bit feathery and a little bit different in terms of textures, and still maintain that negative space that is working so well in the design. That's the vertical movement side of things, as I mentioned earlier, I think is not helped by the way the discs stop at that first horizontal placement. So I'd have to incorporate that as well. Vary hanging heights. Adjust the lengths of the hanging elements slightly to create more variation and avoid a uniform appearance. This will enhance the dynamic quality of the arrangement. So I have got them spaced, but I've probably got them spaced evenly in terms of the drop of those craspedia, and so that's a good suggestion. I should have had a bit more up and down, or not as regulated as I have put it there. Increase the depth. Add a few elements that extend forward or backwards within the composition to create more depth and a three-dimensional effect. That's very true. I know it's hard to tell from the images, and there was a reasonable three-dimensional effect, but I really do need to do some back placement, so it's behind the structure itself, to enhance the depth of the design. Often an issue for me. If you've seen any of the other videos, you know that sometimes I have a problem with depth, because I just get so wound up in the front-facing design itself. Add subtle contrast. Incorporate a subtle contrast in colour or material, a soft grey or a muted green, to add depth and prevent the design from appearing overly monochromatic. So once again, had I incorporated some foliage at the back of the design in a muted green or a soft grey green, like a silver dollar or the dried koala fern, if you're familiar with that, then that would have added that subtle contrast of colour and changed the appearance of monochromatic design that is there at the moment. Strengthen the base connection. Consider softening the transition between the base and the vertical structure with small textural elements to make the connection feel more integrated. So I think what I could have done is run another couple of the discs from the Banksia onto the base itself, rather than leaving the base plain, and had them flat on the base, and that would have brought the base and started your eye from the base rather than above the base through to the rest of the design. So there we have both our analysis and our suggestions from DesignEye for the abstract design using Australian native flora. If you'd like to have your own designs assessed and analysed by DesignEye, I do apologise for my voice today, Then all you need to do is go to the website and upload an image of your design, and within about 24 hours you'll have your assessment back. Each of these assessments, these analyses, is looked at by a human judge just to make sure that it makes sense, it will make sense to you, and that it will help you in your design journey. With that, I will leave you to think about your designs. I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Online, the Designs Dissected series.